Welcome to Lesson 3, Understanding Your Communication Style. So here we're going to talk about 4 different communication styles, and we'll walk through the exercise where you can take the communication style approximator to determine where you fall within these 4 quadrants. So here I'll highlight the 4 communication styles, and you can see, so there's analytical, driving, amiable, and defensive. And the vertical axis there shows that the higher up you go, the more task focused you are versus people and relationship focused. So on the horizontal axis, you can see that on the left side, you're going to be more ask driven when it comes to assertiveness, versus on the left side, you'll be more tell driven and more directive in your communication style. So let's first look at the analytical quadrant. So somebody who's an analytical communicator is going to be very deliberate, thorough, logical, tend to be a very good listener, serious and disciplined, cool and businesslike. But this is going to be somebody who's very focused on the facts and the logic and is going to be careful not to commit too quickly. So let's take Bob as an example here. Bob is an analytical communicator. So when he goes to his team, he's going to take a lot of data. And so if he's self-aware, Bob needs to make sure that he's not getting too into the weeds when he's communicating with his team, not too focused on the numbers, and then he's bringing some kind of a relationship building theme to the conversation aside from just the business, the numbers. Next, we'll talk about somebody who fits into that driver category. So as a driver, they're going to be focused on facts, very sure of their opinions, results-oriented, taking direct action, and being very straightforward with their actions. Somebody that's comfortable with change and not afraid of taking risks, and very comfortable making quick decisions and focusing on results. So if you fit into this category, again, to be self-aware, let's take Bob and say that Bob has the communication style of a driver. He's going to want to make sure to check himself and realize if he's moving too quickly and not bringing his team along with him when he's communicating, and make sure that he's also giving his team the autonomy and the level of responsibility when he's asking them or telling them what tasks need to be done. So next we'll talk about somebody who fits into the amiable quadrant. So this is going to be somebody that's more of the ask and a little bit less assertive. And full disclosure, so I mentioned before that my motivational profile is more affiliative. So I draw my motivation from my relationships with other members of my team. And so I tend to have more of an amiable communication style myself. So I can talk about this one from a personal perspective. But somebody who fits into the amiable category is going to be more open, very receptive, somebody that's unassuming and supportive, tends to be a good listener and easy to get along with, and enjoys personal contact, somebody that likes to coach and counsel others in achieving their goals and provides positive support for the work that others do. So again, if you're self-aware and you understand the blind spots that come along with this communication profile, you can realize that although you are a good listener, easy to get along with, you have to be careful that you're not being too indirect. So this is something that I have to work on, knowing that I am an amiable communicator, is that when I have to give feedback to somebody on my team, I need to make sure that I am being direct and giving feedback in a way that they can understand where their opportunities lie. So the last communication style that we'll touch on is that expressive quadrant. So somebody that fits into this quadrant is very enthusiastic, inspiring, open about their feelings. They enjoy interaction with others. They create excitement and involvement, share ideas, dreams, and enthusiasm, and motivate and inspire, persuade others. So I mentioned I'm that affiliative motivational profile myself. I'm very amiable, but I also kind of fit into that expressive quadrant myself as well. So feedback for somebody who might have that expressive communication style profile, realizing where their opportunities lie, you might have the tendency to charge forward, but really miss out on organizing your thoughts, organizing ideas into a list, and allowing the team to understand where your direction is headed. So now that we've talked through the different communication styles, another important theme to talk about is being able to flex your communication. So just because you might be more naturally inclined toward any one quadrant doesn't mean that you can't flex into another one. So again, looking back and having self-awareness, where do you naturally fit? and what kind of setting might call for you to flex into a different quadrant. So again, that first vein of understanding your communication style so that you're able to overcome your weaknesses and then also to capitalize on your strengths. And that goes back to capitalizing on your strengths and being your true authentic self. So in any leadership role, you are going to have to learn to flex because there's a lot of different situations that call for different communication styles. So I mentioned, as an amiable, it's easy for me to get along with people. It's easy for me to go out and have an easy conversation, but it can be hard when you have to address tough issues. So knowing how to flex into a different quadrant gives you the ability to develop the tools that you need to adapt and flex your style. So a couple of tips for me. I mentioned I feel like I could fit into every quadrant if we want to be real. But I am more that amiable category. So I do thrive on the relationship building portion. But about 5 years ago, I realized that I had gotten so busy, right? In my head, I was really busy. So I was missing that connection before jumping into business. And I took a hard look at how I was connecting people in just the transactional setting. So being in an HR role, I have people that come to me for a lot of different things, like maybe they need to come and change their direct deposit. And so I made a pointed effort that when somebody was coming to me for a transactional piece of information, I would first lead off with a connection. And so when somebody comes to me, hey, how are you doing in your new role? Or how is your new baby sleeping? And so that was a tip that I had to really think about, and something that didn't necessarily come naturally. Another tip is knowing your audience. So while it can be great to form a personal connection before you jump into business, knowing who you're connecting with is really important because not everybody wants to make a personal connection or not everybody likes talking about their personal life at work. So again, knowing your audience and being able to kind of flex that communication style to say, I can still make a connection, but what am I connecting on? So when somebody comes to you for, again, a transactional piece of information, maybe instead of asking a personal question, you can ask, hey, how's that new scrap reduction process coming? Again, making that connection before you jump into business. So along with being aware of your own communication style comes with understanding others' communication. And this will come in some of the other sections, but having social awareness is very important. Being sensitive to the feelings and concerns of others and making an effort to understand others' needs and expectations. So again, this will come later on in the course, but knowing your team's communication style is very important as well, because that allows you to recognize when you need to flex and how you need to flex. So important to have your teammates assess their communication styles so that you can all understand each other better. And again, being able to flex back to the communication that's required for each individual on your team. So along with all of the important parts of understanding your communication style, a big part of communicating is listening. And so the company that I work for, I'm very fortunate to be a part of a culture that is formed out of caring. And our CEO, Bob Chapman, has put together a lot of different leadership courses. One that we offer to all of our team members is Listen Like a Leader. So we ask every team member to listen to each other as if they were leading their team. And so to be present in a conversation means to listen. And I referenced earlier that I understand some of my weaknesses in having that dependability and being able to remember what I've learned from somebody. So taking notes is a big part of listening and enhancing your listening skills through different training. So some tips for listening, and this is something that I do often, especially working in a human resources role. I think I've developed this quite a bit, but asking your team open-ended questions. So I mentioned I have different tasks that I set for myself each week. One of them is to go out and talk to people, recognize somebody, have a good conversation, and by asking open-ended questions. So I'll go out and ask somebody, what did you think about the presentation that we gave at the company update? And genuinely want to hear their answer. Another tip on listening is to host listening sessions. So our organization held a culture survey about a year ago, and based on the results of that, we found certain themes that were identified as opportunities. One being fairness, another being linked to the mission and vision of the organization. So what we did as a result of that was to host listening sessions around those themes to hear team members' feedback on all of those different topics that we identified as opportunities. So I really like this quote, and it's from John Powell, and he's a British composer. Communication works for those who work at it. So it doesn't matter where you start. We all start at different levels of communication, but it's something that you can always work on and improve on. And as long as you're giving it that attention and the effort that it needs, you can be successful in communicating with your team. So we're going to stop and complete another application exercise. So I'd like you to complete the communication style approximator. So we'll walk through what that looks like here. So step number 1, compare each pair of phrases in the 2 columns below and circle the phrase that best describes you. And then at the end, you'll add up the total number of each column. And then you'll identify which column had the most circles, ask or tell, and which column had the most circles, task or people. And then you'll circle the words that match your answers above in the chart to find out what is your approximated style.